There was a time in my life when I felt completely stuck. Not because I didn't have the ability to move forward, but because I kept replaying everything that went wrong. The mistake I made, the opportunity I missed, the relationship that ended. I kept looking at my past like it was holding me hostage, but the truth was, I was the one refusing to let it go. I think we all do this at some point. We allow our past to define us more than it should. We carry the weight of what happened as if it's proof of who we are. But let me ask you this. If you walked into a room and introduced yourself, would you start with your worst mistake? Would you say, hi, I'm the person who failed that business 5 years ago? Or I'm the person who trusted the wrong person and got hurt? Of course not. But somehow, in the quiet of our minds, that's how we identify ourselves. The past is a lesson, not a life sentence. Too many of us live as if we are prisoners to moments that are already gone. We chain ourselves to shame, regret, or disappointment, and then we wonder why we feel so heavy. But what if we saw our past not as a weight, but as wisdom? Not as something to escape, but as something to learn from. Think about this. When a child is learning to walk, they stumble, they fall, they get back up. No parent looks at their child and says, you fell once, so maybe walking just isn't for you. No, they cheer them on, knowing that every fall is just a part of the process. So why do we, as adults, act like one fall, one failure, one heartbreak means we're not worthy of getting up again? I've learned that the past only has the power I give it. It can either be a wall that blocks me or a foundation that builds me. It can either be a source of shame or a source of strength. The difference isn't in what happened. The difference is in what I decide to do with it. We have to make a decision about how we tell our own stories. I've met people who have been through things that should have broken them, yet they walk with joy, with purpose, with strength. And I've met others who have let a single moment define their entire existence. The difference? One chose to rewrite their story. This is not about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it have the final say. Maybe you've been carrying something for years. Maybe you've let one moment, one decision, one failure determine how you see yourself. But what if I told you that the only thing keeping that past alive is you? Because here's the truth. Time doesn't heal wounds. Perspective does. Time alone just lets wounds sit. But when you change your perspective, you stop seeing your past as a sentence and start seeing it as a lesson. So what's the lesson? Maybe the failure taught you resilience. Maybe the heartbreak taught you your worth. Maybe the loss taught you to cherish the present. But no matter what it was, it taught you. And when you've learned from something, you don't need to keep reliving it. You take what you need and you move forward. You see, life moves in one direction, forward. It doesn't go back. It doesn't rewind. And that means we were never meant to live stuck in what was. We were meant to take what we've learned and use it to build what's next. So here's my challenge to you. If you've been holding on to something that no longer serves you, release it. If you've been defining yourself by your past, rewrite the story. And if you've been waiting for permission to move forward, this is it. The past is a lesson, not a life sentence. And today you get to decide to live like it. I remember a moment in my life when things didn't go the way I expected. You know those moments when you feel like the rug has been pulled from underneath you? When something you were sure about suddenly falls apart? When the door you were so confident would open just does. And in that moment, I did what most of us do. I asked, why me? Why did this have to happen? Why did they walk away? Why did I put my trust in something that failed me? It's a natural question, right? Because when life hits us unexpectedly, we want to understand, we want to make sense of it. But what I realized was that why me never gave me answers. It just kept me stuck. Have you ever noticed that? That the more we sit in the question of why me, the deeper we sink into frustration, bitterness, and sometimes even self-pity. And before we know it, we start making conclusions about ourselves based on the things that went wrong. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I should have never tried. Maybe this is just how my life is going to be. But here's what I had to learn. Asking why me doesn't move us forward. It doesn't bring clarity. It doesn't bring healing. It only keeps us focused on a past that we can't change. So I started asking a different question: what's next? And let me tell you, that shift changed everything. Because when you stop asking why me and start asking what's next, something powerful happens. You stop feeling powerless and you start taking responsibility. You stop feeling like life is happening to you and you start realizing that life is happening for you. And I know that might sound strange. How could something painful be happening for me? How could a setback be something that works in my favor? But let me ask you this. How many times have you looked back at a situation you once thought was the worst thing ever, only to realize later that it was actually setting you up for something better? The job you didn't get, but later you found something that aligned with your purpose. That person who left, but in their absence, you found yourself. That failure that embarrassed you, but later became the foundation of your growth. It's funny how life works like that. But in the moment, we can't see it. In the moment, all we feel is the loss, the disappointment, the confusion. And that's why asking what's next is so powerful, because it shifts our focus from what's behind us to what's ahead of us. Think about it like this. If you were driving and you made a wrong turn, would you just sit in the car frustrated, asking over and over, why did I make that turn? No. You'd pull out your GPS and figure out how to get back on track. Yet in life, we do the opposite. We dwell, we replay, we sit in frustration, and all the while we forget that we still have the power to move forward. What's next? That's the question that opens the door to new possibilities. That's the question that reminds us we are not stuck. Because you are not stuck. No matter what has happened, no matter what you've lost, you are never stuck. But the key is this. You have to believe that what's ahead is greater than what's behind. You have to believe that your story is still being written and one chapter does not define the whole book. You have to believe that your life is not over just because one part of it didn't go as planned. So maybe you've been asking why me for too long. Maybe you've been sitting in disappointment, trying to make sense of something that no longer needs your energy. Maybe you've been waiting for answers when what you really need is movement. If that's you, then let this be your moment to shift. Let this be your reminder that there is more ahead. That nothing in your past is greater than what's in your future. That you are not meant to sit in confusion, but to walk in clarity. Because life is not about what happens to you, it's about what you do next. So I'll ask you again, what's next? There was a time in my life when I felt like I was doing everything right, yet somehow I wasn't moving forward. I had the vision, I had the passion, but something was off, and I couldn't figure out what it was until I started paying attention to the voices around me. See, the people around you are either fueling your future or feeding your fears. They are either pushing you forward or keeping you stuck. And sometimes we don't even realize the weight we're carrying just by staying connected to the wrong voices. Have you ever shared a dream with someone and instead of excitement, you were met with doubt? Instead of encouragement, you got a list of reasons why it wouldn't work? And it's not always outright negativity. Sometimes it's the subtle comments, the cautious warnings, the well-meaning advice that keeps you playing small. You sure you want to do that? I just don't want to see you get hurt. Maybe you should be more realistic. And before you know it, the thing you were so excited about starts feeling impossible. Not because it is, but because the people around you didn't have the vision for it. This is why the environment you place yourself in matters. The right people will remind you of what's possible. The wrong people will reinforce your fears. And if you're not careful, you'll start shrinking. Not because you're incapable, but because the voices in your life convince you that you were. I had to learn this for myself. I had to ask, who do I listen to? Who has influence over my decisions? And most importantly, do the people around me reflect where I want to go? Or are they keeping me where I've been? Because let's be honest, some of us are stuck not because we don't have the ability to move forward, but because we are surrounded by people who are comfortable where we are. And comfort can be the most dangerous thing when you're called to grow. Think about an eagle. An eagle was designed to soar. But if an eagle spends too much time around chickens, it will start acting like one. It will forget it was made for the sky. Not because it lost its ability, but because it became too familiar with the ground. And I wonder how many of us are walking around with clipped wings. Not because we aren't meant to fly, but because we've surrounded ourselves with people who never left the ground. The right people in your life will see the greatness in you even when you don't. They will call you higher. They will challenge your excuses. They will remind you of what's in you when you start to forget. And this is important because at some point you will forget. You will have moments of doubt. You will feel like giving up. And in those moments, the voices around you will either push you forward or pull you down. So look at the people in your life. Who do you go to when you need encouragement? Who do you go to when you're unsure? And when you leave those conversations, do you feel lighter? Because you need people who will push you into purpose. People who will challenge you to be better, not people who will make you comfortable in complacency. People who will stretch your vision, not people who will shrink your faith. And sometimes that means making hard choices. Sometimes that means creating distance. Sometimes that means realizing that certain people were part of your history, but they cannot be part of your destiny. Because when you are moving forward, not everyone can come with you. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you don't appreciate them. It simply means that your future requires a different environment. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been second guessing yourself, if you've been feeling like your dreams are too big, take a moment and ask, who am I listening to? Because your next level isn't just about what you do, it's about who you're connected to. Surround yourself with growth-minded people and watch how everything begins to change. One of the biggest reasons people don't move forward isn't because they don't have the ability. It's because they think the journey requires one massive life-changing step. We convince ourselves that transformation happens overnight, that success is a moment instead of a process. And when we don't see immediate results, we assume nothing is happening. But real change, it doesn't happen in one dramatic leap. It happens in the small, consistent steps no one sees. The steps that feel insignificant. The ones that don't look like progress in the moment, but are actually building something greater than we can imagine. Have you ever looked at someone successful and thought, how did they get there? It's easy to assume they had a lucky break or a special opportunity. But if you sat down with them, you'd realize their success wasn't the result of one big moment. It was the result of daily discipline, small decisions, tiny steps. The problem is, we don't like small steps. We want quick results. We want to go from broken to healed overnight, from struggling to thriving instantly, from overlooked to successful in a moment. But that's not how life works. Think about a seed. When you plant it, you don't see anything right away. You water it, but nothing seems to be happening. Days go by, weeks even, and still nothing. And if you're not patient, if you don't trust the process, you might assume the seed is dead. You might even stop watering it. But what you don't realize is that something is happening. Under the surface, roots are growing. The foundation is being built. And at the right time, that seed will break through the soil. That's exactly how progress works. Just because you don't see results immediately doesn't mean nothing is happening. Some of you have been taking small steps and you're frustrated because it feels like nothing is changing. You've been showing up, but you don't see the breakthrough. You've been trying, but you don't see the reward. And you're tempted to quit. But let me tell you, your small steps are doing more than you realize. Every time you show up, you're building something. Every time you choose to keep going, you're growing roots. And if you don't give up, you will see the results. The problem is too many people quit before they see the fruit of what they planted. They stop because it feels slow, because it doesn't feel like enough, because they assume the small steps aren't working. But imagine if a child learning to walk gave up after falling a few times. Imagine if they said, well, I tried, I fell, maybe walking just isn't for me. That would be ridiculous, right? But how many times do we do the same thing? How many times do we try something, experience a setback, and assume it's a sign to stop? We have to stop seeing slow progress as no progress. Just because it's not happening fast doesn't mean it's not happening. Every small step matters. Sometimes we don't want to start small because we compare our beginning to someone else's middle. We look at people who are further along and feel discouraged, but comparison will kill your progress if you let it. You don't need to have it all figured out today. You don't need to know every step ahead. You just need to take the next one. Because here's the truth. Small steps over time lead to big change. The person who gets in shape didn't do it in a day. They made small choices consistently. The person who built a successful career didn't wake up one day and arrive there. They made small decisions over time. And if we can shift our mindset, if we can learn to embrace the process, to trust the journey, to keep showing up, even when it feels slow, then one day we'll look back and realize just how far we've come. So if you've been waiting for a perfect moment to take a leap, stop waiting. Start small. Take the step. Keep going and trust that your faithfulness today is building something greater than you can see. There was a time when I thought healing meant erasing the past. That if I could just forget what happened, if I could just pretend it didn't affect me, then maybe I could move forward. But I learned something along the way. Healing is not about pretending the pain never happened. Healing is about making peace with what was so that it no longer controls what is. We carry so much with us. Wounds from words spoken over us. Regret from choices we wish we could undo. disappointments, from moments that didn't go the way we expected. And sometimes we don't even realize how much of it is shaping the way we live. How much of it is filtering the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, the way we see the future. Have you ever found yourself reacting to something in a way that surprised you? Maybe someone made a simple comment and suddenly you felt anger rise up. Maybe you were given an opportunity, but instead of excitement, you felt fear. Maybe you wanted to trust again, but something inside you just wouldn't let you, and you couldn't figure out why until you looked deeper and realized you weren't reacting to the moment, you were reacting to the past. This is why healing is so important, because unhealed wounds don't just stay in the past. They show up in the present. They shape the way we move forward. And if we're not intentional, we will find ourselves sabotaging what's ahead simply because we never made peace with what's behind. But healing is not about rushing. It's not about forcing yourself to just get over it. Healing is a process. And the first step is honesty. You have to be willing to acknowledge what hurt you, to name it, to face it. Because you cannot heal what you refuse to confront. Some of us have spent years trying to suppress the pain, thinking that if we just ignore it long enough, it will disappear. But pain that is buried alive doesn't die. It grows. It seeps into places we never expected. And one day, it surfaces in ways we don't recognize. Healing requires you to be honest with yourself, to say, yes, that hurt me. Yes, that moment changed me. Yes, I'm still carrying that disappointment. Not so you can stay stuck in it, but so you can finally release it. And releasing it doesn't mean the past didn't happen. It doesn't mean what was done to you was okay. It simply means that you are choosing to no longer let it define you. Because what happened to you is not your identity. What they said about you is not your future. What you lost is not the end of your story. You are allowed to heal. You are allowed to grow beyond the place where the pain first met you. You are allowed to rewrite the narrative. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it takes time. Yes, there will be days when you wonder if you're making progress. But the fact that you are willing to do the work, the fact that you are choosing to face what others run from, that alone is proof that healing is happening. The real evidence of healing is not that you forget what happened. It's that when you remember, it no longer has power over you. It no longer controls your emotions. It no longer dictates your decisions. Some of you have been waiting to move forward, thinking that healing has to happen first. But what if healing isn't something that happens before you move? What if healing is something that happens as you move? You don't have to have it all figured out today. You don't have to wake up tomorrow and feel brand new. But you do have to make the decision that you are worthy of healing, that you are worthy of peace, that you are worthy of a future that is not dictated by your past. Because healing is not about erasing the past, it's about reclaiming your future. At some point in life, we all reach a moment where we stand between what was and what could be. A moment where the past is pulling us one way, but the future is calling us forward. And in that moment, we have a choice to stay where it's familiar, where it's comfortable, where we know what to expect, or to step into something greater, even when we don't have all the answers. The truth is, moving forward will always require faith. Not just faith in the outcome, but faith in the process. Faith that even when you don't see the whole picture, even when you don't have all the details, even when you don't feel ready, something greater is ahead. But here's the challenge. Most of us want certainty before we move. We want to know exactly how things will work out. We want guarantees that we won't fail, that we won't get hurt, that things will go exactly the way we hope. And because we can't see that, we hesitate. We overthink. We wait for a perfect moment that never comes. But faith doesn't work that way. Faith requires movement, even when you don't have all the details. Faith is trusting that what's ahead is greater than what's behind, even when the road is unclear. Have you ever driven at night? Your headlights don't show you the entire road at once. They only illuminate a few feet ahead. But as long as you keep driving, as long as you keep moving, more of the road is revealed. That's exactly how faith works. You don't need to see the whole path to take the next step. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you're standing on the edge of something new, something unknown, and you're hesitating because you don't feel ready. But what if I told you that you don't have to feel ready to be ready? That readiness isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting that you have everything you need for this moment. Because you do. Everything you've been through has prepared you for what's ahead. Every challenge you faced, every lesson you've learned, every moment you thought would break you but didn't, it all shaped you for this. And now, the only thing left to do is move. Some of you have been waiting for a sign, waiting for a confirmation, waiting for the fear to disappear before you take the step. But fear doesn't disappear before faith. It disappears as you step out in faith. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that fear will not control you. You are not meant to stay where it's comfortable. You are not meant to live your life looking back. You are meant to move forward. And yes, it might be uncertain. Yes, it might feel risky. But the risk of staying the same is far greater than the risk of stepping into something new. So what are you waiting for? What if everything you've been hoping for is on the other side of your willingness to move? What if the clarity, the opportunity, the breakthrough you've been praying for is waiting for you to take the first step? You don't have to see the whole road. You just have to trust that as you move, the path will unfold. Because forward is the only direction worth going.